Here's Lulu and Dick. Let's start reading.
You ready? Which one do you want to start with?
Side trains.
Side trains.
Trains.
Before trains, around 300 years ago, horses pulled heavy goods along rails called wagonways. In 1808, Richard Trevithick built Catch Me Who Can, the first steam engine on wheels, which was known as a locomotive. In 1829, Robert Stephenson won a competition to see who could build the best locomotive with rockets. From then on, people began to build lots of locomotives that were all based on Stephenson's design. The Golden Age of Steam. The invention of Stephenson's rocket nearly 200 years ago paved the way for the building of trains and railways all over the world. This meant that people could travel faster than ever before. This is a busy station in the 1930s. By then, people were travelling on some of the fastest steam trains ever built. Before trains, journeys were slow and difficult. People travelled by horse or on foot, and it often took days from one city to the next.
That's like Lulu and Dick were jumping on the blue train, if you know that. They were jumping on the train, so this book is about trains.
Okay.
Yeah.
So here we have a station clock. Let's have a look under the flap. Before trains, people across the UK set their watches to different times depending on where they lived. But when trains were first introduced, this caused chaos, as people often missed their trains. So in 1840, all station clocks were set to the time in London, known as Standard Time. It says here, a steam locomotive pulled a train of coaches and wagons. Cargo was packed into crates. Let's have a look in here. Mail. Freight wagons were loaded with all kinds of cargo. Mail, fresh food, and even animals. Down here. By the 1930s, millions of people were using trains to get to work, visit friends, and take trips to the seaside. Excursion trains were called specials. Rail workers made railways run smoothly. Let's go to the next page. Oh no, there's a flap underneath this passenger coaches.
There's flaps everywhere.
There's something under this flap. Passengers in first class were served meals in luxurious dining coaches. Third class coaches were basic with uncomfortable wooden seats. And there's another flap here.
Yeah, there's literally flaps everywhere.
A signalman held up a green flag when it was safe for the train to go. Next one. Full steam ahead. Soon thousands of locomotives were being built to run on the railways. They worked by using burning coal and water to make steam. This British steam locomotive brought passenger coaches behind it. Together, the locomotive and coaches made up the train. A separate wagon called the tender carried fuel and water. Let's have a look underneath the tender. The driver controlled the train from the cab. A stoker shoveled the coal from the tender into the firebox. Like in here. Here is how a steam locomotive works. Coal is burned in a firebox to heat water in a boiler. Inside the boiler, the water boils to make steam. Steam fills one side of a cylinder, then the other, pushing a metal disc called a piston forward and back. A valve lets the steam in and out. The piston is connected to a rod that turns the wheels. The steam flows out of the cylinder through the chimney. This happens again and again to keep the wheels turning. Some locomotives, called tank engines, carried water and fuel in tanks on their side. Right, let's have a look under this flap.
There's so many flaps everywhere.
Tank engines were small locomotives that could move around easily on lines with lots of bends. Each locomotive and coach had wheels on a steel frame to move it along the tracks. The steel frame is called a bogie. Attached to each bogie are different types of wheels: driving wheels, leading wheels, and trailing wheels. Leading wheels guided the train along the tracks. Driving wheels were fixed directly to the locomotive. Trailing wheels supported the cab. Let's have a look up here. The first underground railway was the Metropolitan line, built in London in 1863. Steam locomotives pulled passenger coaches through long tube-shaped tunnels. It says here, all metropolitan trains were painted red. The locomotives created a lot of smoke, so tunnels and stations were often very dirty. When a train reached the end of a railway line, it was turned around on a turntable, then went back on the same line in the opposite direction. This is a turntable with a rotating section of track.
That's
That's
cool.
a smokestack. Early long-distance locomotives, such as this US one, with lots of coaches and had big powerful engines. Like down here at the front, you have a cowcatcher. Cowcatchers pushed animals and other objects off the rails.
Yeah, cowcatcher.
There's a warning bell up here. There's a cab. This locomotive is called Jupiter. Let's see if we can get into underneath this flap. Trying to find the way into this flap. This is a difficult flap to get into. Oh, here we are. Right. That's logs, tender and trough. The fastest long-distance trains had metal pipes that sucked up water for their boilers from troughs as they moved along. Other trains had to stop at water stations to refill, which made their journeys much longer. Look in this bit here, in this carriage. That's a passenger coach. Then let's see if we can get a look in the flap where the cowcatcher is. Here we are. The cowcatcher pushed any animals aside very gently to avoid the tram being damaged and the animals being hurt.
The train being damaged and the animals being hurt.
That's it. Luxury travel. 100 years ago, travel by steam was seen as the height of sophistication. Wealthy people took long journeys across the world in luxurious coaches.
Yeah.
That's a salon coach. Conductors helped passengers on and off the train. People brought lots of luggage. Important people, such as royalty, had their own trains.
Yeah, the royal train is here.
Right, so here we have a couple of trains. This one is the Orient Express. The Orient Express was a famous international luxury train that travelled between Paris and Istanbul, stopping at many cities along the way. It ran from 1883 for almost 100 years.
How it ran until the 1978 he ran.
Do you mean how or why?
How it said almost 100 years.
Well, it did, but not in the same form. I think they didn't always go the same route. The route got a bit shorter after a while.
Yeah.
Right. Locomotives soon became dirty from engine smoke. Workers cleaned the Orient Express at every station to make sure it looked its best. Oh, I didn't know that. The tender was filled with coal and water to power the locomotive. Guards kept a close eye on cargo and luggage to stop things from being stolen. Some magazines were written specially for people to read during their journey. After dinner, passengers retired to a plush salon or lounge. There's a flap here. Let's open this flap up. One salon had a library where passengers could relax in comfortable armchairs.
I didn't interest.
There's another flap. In another salon, people could talk or pass the time by reading and sewing. Let's have a look here. It says meals were served by waiters in the dining coach. It was designed to be like a first-class restaurant. As people ate, they could watch the ever-changing view. All meals were cooked on board by the very best chefs in a small galley or kitchen. Cabins called sleeping coaches had bedrooms and separate bathrooms. During the day, cabins had comfortable seats. At night, servants folded down beds from the cabin walls. Right. Passengers carried luggage onto trains. That's a day compartment, sleeping compartment. Right, let's have a look at the rail train.
Let's look at the rail train.
Oh, hold on. There may be a last flap for the Orient Express. The Orient Express carried valuables, bags of mail, and packages across Europe. Right, here we are. A locomotive called Gladstone pulled the Royal Train. A bit like Gladstone Park.
Yeah.
Locomotives that pulled the royal coaches were very fast, with big boilers that created lots of steam. They were regularly serviced so they didn't break down, and the Queen didn't miss any important appointments. One of the most magnificent private trains was the Royal Train, first built for Queen Victoria in 1869.
Queen Victoria. You can see Queen Victoria in the coach there.
Sure. Queen Victoria's day carriage was furnished in silk with thick carpets to keep the carriage warm. At night, the Queen retired to a sleeping compartment. Attendants kept out of sight.
But this time, you have to turn the thing.
Turn it this way up. Steam giants pulled more coaches and wagons. Here it says Niagaras were massive American freight locomotives that could pull 100 loaded freight wagons. Here we have a freight wagon. Fresh food was packed into ice-filled wagons. Steam and smoke poured from the chimney. Niagaras towered 5 metres or 16 feet above the track. During the 20th century, huge steam locomotives travelled vast distances, especially in big countries. Running until 1974, the P-36 was a Russian passenger train which took passengers to stations thousands of miles apart. Huge A-class steam locomotives pulled freight in China until the 1990s. They could run for days without taking on more fuel. Until the 1950s, mail trains pulled by steam locomotives picked up mail, sorted it, and delivered it in just a few hours without having to stop the train. Unsorted mail bags were hung from hooks on station platforms. The bags were caught in a net on the train as it passed, then taken to the sorting coach. Inside the mail coach, workers sorted the mail into bags. Once mail was sorted, it was put into bags and hung onto hooks on the outside of the train. A van collected the bag and delivered the mail. A net on the platform caught the bag. Right, here we go. During the 1930s, new locomotives were designed that could pull coaches over long distances. Hiawatha No. 1 was one of the quickest. It ran 800 kilometers or 500 miles between Chicago and Twin Cities, Minnesota, USA in around 6 hours. The locomotive had a new streamlined design, and passenger coaches were designed to carry more people. So look at the front. Older locomotives had flat fronts so air pushed against them. New streamlined locomotives had pointed noses to cut through the air. This meant they could go faster. Coaches had rows of comfortable seats. Each coach could carry around 50 people. So each driving wheel was over 2 meters, 7 foot tall. Locomotive 4468 Mallard holds the record for the fastest ever steam train. On July the 3rd, 1938, Mallard reached 203 kilometers per hour, or 126 miles per hour, the fastest ever steam train speed. Mallard's driver, Joseph Duddington, and fireman Thomas Bray hadn't told anyone they were planning to do this, so it came as a surprise to everyone on board. It says this coach had an extra wheel that recorded Mallard's speed. Smoke from the boiler rushed over Mallard's streamlined body. Down below, it says the Flying Scotsman was an express service that ran non-stop from London to Edinburgh. The steam inside the boiler was superheated, which made the train faster. It says passengers could have their hair trimmed by an on-board barber. That would be good for you. A journey on the Flying Scotsman took just over 7 hours. There were lots of facilities for passengers on board.
That would be good for deck.
That would be good for deck. Extra heat tubes running through the boiler heated steam twice, making it even hotter. This made the wheels turn faster. Right, here we are. Diesel engines. Around 80 years ago, locomotives that ran on diesel fuel were invented. They are still used today. Diesels soon replaced long-distance steam trains as they could go even further without stopping to refuel. This diesel is called the California Zephyr. From 1949 to 1983, Zephyr trains ran a 4,000 kilometre or 2,500 mile round trip across the USA. Passengers could sit in Vista-Dome coaches to look at the scenery. Right, let's have a look at the locomotive here. A diesel locomotive powers the train using a combination of diesel fuel and electricity. Lift the flap to see how it works. Oh my goodness.
This is complex.
It is. Let's have a look at this Vista-Dome coach flap.
It's easy to know how a steam train works.
Yeah, the Vista-Dome coach had an upper floor with lots of high windows. Tickets to sit here were more expensive. Have a look in the sleeping compartment. Oh, you can see inside the sleeping compartment. Right, let's go down here. So some diesels have locomotives at both ends of the train. At the end of the line, the driver climbs out and changes locomotives and drives the train in the opposite direction. Yeah, many freight locomotives now run on diesel. This is a US Santa Fe diesel locomotive. It pulls lots of very heavy freight wagons. Diesels don't produce much smoke, so are cleaner than steam engines.
Yeah, freight trains.
The driver has to climb up steps to reach the cab. Right, and that shows the inside of the cab.
Yep.
This is a tank wagon, a sealed container pumped full of liquids and gases.
Yeah.
Some containers are carried to a dock on a container ship, then loaded directly onto the train to be taken inland. Huge cranes lift the containers from the ship and onto the train. In this flat wagon, cargo is strapped directly onto the flatbed.
Yeah, wood, logs.
Right. Shunters are small diesel trains that move coaches or wagons and push broken down trains out of the way. The shunters push the wagons up to the locomotive. The wagons are then secured to the locomotive using chain fastenings called couplings. Shunters are small diesel trains that move coaches or wagons and push broken down trains out of the way. Going electric. Nowadays many trains are powered by electricity. They pick up power as they move along the track. Sometimes a metal arm called a pantograph collects electricity from cables above the track. Right, this train is called a bi-level because it has 2 floors. An electrical current passes from the cables to the pantograph and then into the train. Electricity turns the train's wheels and also provides power for heating, lighting, and opening and closing the doors. A transformer is a device to transfer electricity. It's fixed to the underside of the train and sends electricity out to the wheels, lights, and other circuits. The wheels turn as they receive power from the transformer. Outer trains are powered by an electrified third rail at the side of the main track. The driver's cab, not outer trains, other trains are powered by an electrified third rail at the side of the track. The driver's cab is at the front of the first coach. There's no locomotive. Yeah, interesting. It's coming out of a tunnel.
Yeah.
It's the third rail. Let's have a look at the top here. An electric monorail train runs along a single rail called a monorail. Electric railway lines take trains through underground tunnels too. In some cities, trams run alongside roads. Oh. Traffic on the road stops to let the trams pass, so the trams aren't slowed down. Train drivers are guided by electric lights called signals. People in regional control rooms use computers to change the signals and make sure that the trains move safely along the tracks. At a junction, tracks cross or join up with each other. connecting tracks are linked by a sliding section of rails called points. 1. The train approaches the junction. It needs to turn right. 2. But the points are set to link up with the track going left. 3. First a signal tells the train to stop. 4. A signalman can see the position of the trains on screens in the control room. He uses a computer to change the points and signals on the track. Back at the track. 5. The points slide to the right to link up with the track going right. The signal changes, telling the train driver to go. 6. The train moves onto the right-hand track. High-speed travel. In the 21st century, superfast electric passenger trains can take people over long distances faster than ever before. Very powerful electric trains can reach speeds of 300 km per hour. They're nicknamed bullet trains because they have pointed noses shaped like bullets. This is a bullet train called the Shinkansen. It runs between major cities in Japan. Bullet trains have their own tracks separate from other trains. They're very straight, so the trains don't have to slow down to go around bends. Cables supply high-powered electricity to the train. Its streamlined shape cuts through the air. Bridges are built directly across lakes and valleys to keep the tracks as straight as possible. Let's look down here. Tilting trains can travel quickly along tracks with lots of bends. The train is tilted to the side as it turns, but the wheels stay firmly on the track. Extending rods move each side of the train up and down so that the train turns smoothly. Go to the top. The Channel Tunnel Railway takes high-speed trains through 37.8 kilometres or 23.5 mile undersea tunnels between France and the UK. Eurotunnel shuttle trains carry cars, trucks and other vehicles in trainers. Vehicles drive onto the trailers. Passengers stay inside their vehicles during the journey. Emergency vehicles can access trains through a service tunnel if there is an accident or if a train breaks down. Tunnels pass 75 metres under the sea. They were dug using massive drills called tunnel boring machines. Lift the flap to see how. Down here. Maglevs, or magnetic levitation trains, use powerful magnets to hover above a guideway. Lift this flap to see what makes maglevs hover. Electricity flows through metal coils, turning them into very strong magnets. These push against magnets at the bottom of the train, lifting it up and moving it along. Maglevs are the fastest passenger trains. This is a Japanese maglev. It's reached a record 581 km per hour or 361 miles per hour. Unusual trains. Over the years, many amazing and unusual trains have been built. Rack and pinion railways make it possible for trains to travel up and down steep slopes. First built in 1908, the Nilgiri Railway in India has some of the steepest tracks in the world. The track has an extra rail and wheel to help the locomotive grip onto the rails. A grooved rail called the rack runs along the middle of the track. A cogwheel or pinion slots into the gaps in the rack. This keeps the train moving steadily up and down. The locomotive pushes coaches up mountains 2,200 metres high. Downhill, the locomotive goes in front of the coaches, supporting their weight. Funicular trains use cables to pull passengers up and down steep slopes. A cable is attached to the front of each train. Rails run steeply uphill. A motor at the top of the slope turns a spool wheel, winding the cable around it and pulling the train up. It unwinds again to lower the train down. Some mountain trains weave uphill on very curvy tracks or cut through tunnels in steep mountainsides. The Darjeeling Railway in India zigzags around 250 bends and loops. The train climbs a total of 2,000 metres or 7,000 feet. The most severe loop is called Agony Point. The fastest vehicle to run on rails are rocket-powered sleds. This sled has reached speeds of 3,329 miles per hour. Snowplow trains clear snow so other trains don't slip on the rails. Big whirling blades on the front of the train whip thick snow off the tracks. Some trains use ferries to cross seas or wide rivers. The back of the ferry opens and the railway tracks continue inside. Miniature trains take people on short train rides, just for fun. There you go. That was See Inside Trailers.